Anders Caspersson. I am the technical art director for Dust 514, working in the Shanghai studio of CCP. And today I'm gonna talk to you guys about how we create the battlegrounds on the planets of Eve, where dust marks will fight for planet domination. And if the clicker worked, that would be awesome. Oh, there we go. So I'm gonna do a quick introduction on planetary conquest. It will be covered much more in detail tomorrow at noon. And after that, I'm gonna throw myself into how we create these battlegrounds. And I'm gonna explain how we set up the landscapes, the terrains, how we change them based on what kind of planet you're on, how we deploy and create the surface infrastructures that the players will fight in, how we set up our game modes, and lastly, how we apply the atmosphere and the lighting of all these scenes. And after that, I'm going to show an example of how we can use this technology to create in-game events for the players. So last year, Kjartan and Pierre held a presentation called Seeding the Universe. And it was a theory behind how we wanted to do this. So today I'm going to cover how we are actually doing it. And as we're tightening the link between Eve and Dust with the addition of planetary conquest, it becomes even more clear that whatever you do in the game can make a difference. No matter if you're running a corporation or if you're doing mining operations on an asteroid far out in space, your actions matter. And you contribute to the universe. So perhaps winning that battle in Dust will secure the ownership of a planet where your corporation can deploy a surface infrastructure that will boost clone production. Or maybe give a bonus to clone transport times that enable you to perform a sneak attack on a rival corporation's planet, and by that changing the power balance in the universe. So we wanted to expand on the Eve universe, and we also wanted to give you a chance to own your own planet. So in order to do that, we needed to find a way to visualize all these 7,000 temperate planets that Eve has. But we also are working on a PS3, so we want to make this optimized. We want to keep it simple. We also want to keep control over our content creations. And since it's a digital downloadable game, we want to keep the download size small. And oh, sorry. Anyway, so in order to do this, we created districts on the planets of Eve. Each district will have a specific seeded location on the planet, and they will not be overlapping or anything like that. The districts can be owned by corporations, and the corporations can dictate the function of these districts. So why did I want to do that? Because of this guy over here, the primary wartime commodity in Dust. Because districts, they generate clones over time, and you can sell these clones for profit or use them to take over another district. And the functionality of a district will affect your clone production. So to change the function of a district, you can deploy an SI to it. And SIs, there are huge structures deployed on the planet. And these are the objectives where you fight and where the player will fight over. And you can provide various functionality to these districts. Like up on the slide here, you can have the cargo hub, which provides a 50% bonus to clone storage. And a big key factor here is that the corporations are allowed to change and replace the SI in a district. So this is something we need to take in consideration when we create the content. So districts, they are the industrial backbone of your corporations, and this is where you will fight and destroy anybody who interferes with your business. So in essence, these are the battlegrounds that we will need to create. And if you want to know more about planetary conquest, I suggest you check out the talk on it at Friday at noon in Tranquility. So if we build up a district from the ground and up, we start with the landscape, which is the terrain and all the environment you're running around in. We can change this then based on what kind of environment you're fighting in. Is it a desert? Is it a sandy place? Does it look like Iceland? And then we deploy the surface infrastructures. We add a game mode, skirmish, ambush. We set it up so you can play in it. And then we add the lighting. A quick note on the engine. We are working on the Unreal Engine 3. It's an awesome engine to work in. When it comes to tools, it does multiplayer games straight out of the box. But it's lacking a lot of features for a large-scale MMO like the one we are making. So we needed to create some new systems to accommodate for this. So starting with the landscape. We have some key requirements for doing our terrain. We want to manually create it, not procedurally generate it. We want to be able to get as much reuse out of it as possible. We want to be large enough so that we can reuse it, and because we only want to ship as few terrains as possible to the clients. We also needed to support the multiple environment types, and it's the PS3. There's not much memory to work with. Performance is so-so. And we cannot ship too much data either. So we're doing it very simple. Our terrain is height field based, which means we have a grayscale map that defines the height of the terrain. A full map can be 5 by 5 kilometers out to the edges. Of course, we cannot play straight on the edge, but we can host many gameplay areas in this terrain. It's dynamically updating the level of detail depending where you are, so you get the most out of the performance. And we create these using Mudbox and World Machine and in-editor sculpt tools. In the beginning, we focused a lot on in-editor sculpt tools, but we realized software like Mudbox is much more capable of handling this kind of high detail geometry. And we implemented this workflow a few months ago, 3 or 4, which is why you will see a significant increase in quality in our terrains from now on. We then create something we call blend masks, and they control where the detailed surface is on the terrain. For example, the green here might be rock, yellow might be sand, and we have 4 of these layers plus 1 base layer. And this will all stream from the HDD in real time. And we combine everything into something we call a virtual texture that is dynamically updated in runtime as well. We use World Machine and our own in-editor painting tools to create these. And here is how we build the terrain. We start with the blend masks. The blend masks define the tiling detail textures. And this doesn't look much yet. So what we do is we create a color map that overlaps the whole terrain to give it variation over distance. And when we add those two together, you get a little bit more of a detail and variety into the terrain. If we put some lighting on it, it still looks a bit flat. So what we do, we create a normal map to enhance the detail of the terrain. And here we end up with a final looking terrain. We have implemented some techniques to get very sharp seams between the different blend masks, like you see in the rocks and the grass here. Even though we have a very low resolution blend mask, we still get a sharp transition between these two areas, which will be pretty awesome if we try to do something like snow in the future. We have road splines and decals. The road splines, we place them, they shape the terrain, so we get a flat terrain where we have them, and we apply road materials to them. We also finally, for Uprising, got vegetation into the game. I don't know if you guys have played the game, it's looking a bit flat. So together with that, and the new increased detail of our textures, we're starting to get a pretty good result out of our terrains. But we want to have even more out of them, so we have something we call environment types. This means we can swap the terrain textures and the road decals and everything out based on what the battle server tells the client to load. And I've colored this line here orange. It's because we want to base this based on how the planet looks in Eve, but we haven't implemented it yet, so I tried to keep it clear what's going in and what's not going in. There will be more orange lines later. So for each environment type, we create a new unique color map, like the ones you see here. New set of detailed textures, road, new vegetation meshes, and textures. And if we look at this vista shot, I'm also quite happy to show this to you guys, because I don't know if you remember, but this is how it looks in game now. And we've made some fantastic improvements to how our terrains look. So if we change the environment type of this, we can drastically change the appearance of the terrain without actually changing the geometry to get very different types of environments. So we need something to put on them. Surface infrastructures, defining the function of your district. These are collections of components that we build separately. They're self-contained maps, which means we can create them very easily. And we have 3 sizes of these. We need to be able to stream these guys in and out because of memory limitations, but we also want them to be visible for a distance. And they need to be able to be updated based on the player's decisions. And of course, they need to blend in the terrain, and they should be self-contained. So this is how we build them. It's a separate terrain with a lot of meshes on it. You probably recognize it. We construct them in 2 parts. One part is always loaded. It contains the gameplay objectives, low-level LODs, stuff that's visible from a far distance. And as you get closer, we stream in the second part, which has the high detail geometry, and all things like lights, effects, and so on. They also need to support every type of gameplay element that we have. Hack points, turrets, supply depots, CRUs, and spawn points they all have a subset of this so we, as a level designer, you don't know what's going to be in this location, but you know it's going to have everything you need to create the gameplay. We have medium ones, small ones. Small one looks tiny, but it's actually quite large. If you look at it from the ground up. So when we create them, we place these dummy objects that includes everything that we will need. And when they're loaded in game, maybe we only use the null cannon that shoots at the MCCs. So to place these on the terrains, we generate these sockets. And we give them unique names. And in the future, we're going to link them together so that if you change one, it will automatically update the ones it has as children below it. So by changing, for example, the blue one in the middle here, we will automatically update the other ones that are linked to it. This is how it looks on a top-down shot from the editor. This is our plateaus terrain. We have divided this one into 3 areas that we call battlegrounds. Some of them only have medium and small sockets, so to support planetary conquest, we need to have a large socket, so you guys can change the SI in it. And this one supports this. I don't know if you guys recognize it, if you have been playing the game. So looking at it like this, I removed the other ones, and now we only have one large socket here, and we then stream in our SI into it. And this is all controlled by the backend when we load the map. So as you guys have been playing in the beta, you will notice we just randomized this. But in Uprising, we have a subset of districts where you guys can actually replace the SIs, and they will be persistent until you guys change it to another one. So SIs are in essence a recipe of different of these small, medium, and large components, even though right now we only support switching large components. So if we have this production facility, it could come with a set of components that actually make sense to be support structure for a production facility. And if we change this for a cargo hub, that can have different kind of components placed around it. So we make standalone maps. It's very easy to parallelize this production. We have working hard for a long time to come up with a pipeline, and as we are soon locking that down, we could potentially even outsource these and create a lot of content really fast. We can push these ones out between updates, and since everything is defined by the backend, we can change the configuration and the layout of these and how they're placed in the battlefield just by doing a server update. It also makes it very easy for me to budget the assets, because since we know exactly the budget of one of these components, we can just create a point system for the level designers and level artists so they know how many they can place close to each other without breaking the budget. And it also guarantees that we never load too much assets because they stream out when you get far away from them. Additionally to these sockets, we actually place geometry on the terrain as well, for additional cover, for detail, visual style, and this geometry will be persistent in all combinations of these battlegrounds. For example, these pipes are needed to create some cover around the roads, so we place them straight on the terrain. And here we actually experimented with creating an all full map like this. It goes against the fact that we want to be able to change and reuse these environments. If you guys have played the beta, you recognize this area, and it's always the same, apart from the sockets that we replace. Probably not going to do that much of this, and go more towards a socket-based system. Back to environment types. I want to place them up here, because the environment types can actually affect every geometry we have in the game. We can swap out any material based on the environment type. So imagine having your character drop suits get frost on them when they're fighting in snow, for example. Or if you have camo on your drop suit, maybe it's a desert camo when you're in the desert, or a green camo when you're in a green environment. Not implemented yet, but we have these options we have to enhance the experience. We assign a material switch, so it's very easy for us to create these materials, but it can be a lot of materials. So for environment objects, we made a procedural material that actually changes automatically based on what environment you're in. If you look at these pipes, they are covered in some kind of green moss. You don't really see it that much, but when we switch to rocky sand, they get covered in a slight layer of sand, so it's they fit much more into the environment. And these rocks here are just placed as static meshes on the terrain, and we can dramatically change the appearance of them as well when we change environment type. So the game modes. Game mode levels, as we call them, are small map files that we create in Unreal. They, consist of everything that we need to run the battle start locations where objectives are, playable area size, and where installations are supposed to be. And we can create multiple game mode levels for our battlegrounds. So if we go back to this area, and we place some sockets in the some components in the sockets. This is how the current skirmish looks at for this area, where you can see the level designers have decided to use 2 small sockets for the D and E objectives, instead of using, for example, the socket that is below the one with the D objective. So we can create variations of this, where we have a smaller playable area, and we only have 3 objectives, but we use the sockets differently. So we need to light this. And in Eve, we have a few lighting parameters we can take into consideration. It's the color of the sun in the solar system of the planet. There are a few. And there is also a time of day, depending on what side of the planet you're fighting on. And we decided to pick 3. And we also can randomize weather conditions. So we create mood levels, as we call them. They're a set of environments. We stream them into a socket as well. It contains everything we need for atmosphere and lighting and weather. And we create one of them for each type of combinations. It might sound like a lot of work, but this gives us complete artistic control over every atmosphere. And currently we have 6, I think. They're very easy to make. We can ship them out after launch. So we're going to be continuing and creating more of these. This is how we want it to work. When you get a planet, we seed the color of the sun in the solar system. The battle server will pick time of day based on a district's position, which is do not do now. Now it's randomized. But we will always randomize the weather. So we don't have day and night cycles, we have day and night settings. And we want them to be based on where you are on the planet. Same vista with our night mode, with our oversized moon, but it looks really awesome. And here's how we can change this, which is replacing the environment type and the mood level. And here's how a clear day in Shanghai looks like currently. So in order to explain the lighting tech we have, here's a basic one-on-one in game lighting. If you look at the picture, it's covered, half of the picture is covered in sunlight, the other one is in shadow. So we need to have some kind of direct light, which is usually the sunlight. We also have artificial light sources, like the street light you see up there, and the little spotlights on the headlights of the vehicle that's placed there. But that's not enough. We need indirect light, like the light coming from the sky, which lights up the area that's in shadow. We also want bouncing light, light reflecting from different surfaces onto other materials. And then, of course, we need to have shadows. We need to have shadows in near distance, and we need to have shadows in far distance. And then, on top of that, we need to consider if something is static or dynamic. This whole level is mostly static, so we can light this in a separate way. But if you drive a tank in here, that's a dynamic object, so we have to come up with a different solution to light that. So everything in our level is lit by the sunlight. It's an Unreal dominant directional light, straight from the Unreal editor tech. But then we have to shift stuff up into 2 things: components and terrain dynamic objects and socketed geometry, non-socketed geometry. Components are standalone maps, and they can be placed anywhere in the world. We can rotate them in 8 different directions, and they need to fit with every possible environment and atmosphere. And they have interiors and exteriors, and they're also our main areas of interest, so we want them to look really good. So what we do with these, we light them with static lights, and we build something that called light maps to hold all this light information. And we use this for the key lights and additional light, like all the artificial light sources you see here are baked into light maps. And this is how it looks with only the sunlight together with these light maps. This is not enough, because the sky shines light all over the scene. And this is the blue light you see here. And we bake this information too, so we can set this based on what atmosphere you're in. And then we also want to have the terrain. If you place something white in the middle of a yellow terrain, you will get yellow light spilled up on the, reflected up on the object. And this is something we also bake in, and this is the red color. That's only red here for, so it will be easy for you to see it. Yes, you have red color somewhere in the outpost as well, but we don't really care about that. It looks really good from the outside, and it doesn't have that much of effect on the inside. And here's some sunlight on that. And the final lighting result of the lighting information that we have is looking something like this. And if you look at these pipes again in a lighting only mode, you will see on the bottom of the pipes how the terrain color, which is yellow in this case, is bouncing up on the pipes, so they feel much more integrated into the environment. Shadows are really expensive, so we have to come up with different kinds of shadows for different situations. Up close, they're fully dynamic, but for components, we pre-calculate shadow maps for far distance shadows and near distance shadows. So we can cast shadows at any distance without hurting performance. And we can keep them low resolution because they're really far away. But since they are pre-calculated, they do restrict our sunlight direction to 16 directions, which means we cannot have a moving sun and have this shadow solution. But on the other hand, our battles are 20 minutes, so the sun doesn't move that far over that time. For dynamic objects, we can't use any of these existing Unreal solutions. Light environments that saves data based on light maps only will work in outposts, not on the terrain. Light probes can pick up the indirectional light and apply them to the objects, but we have so large terrain, so we can't use this. It will be too many. And we also have the static meshes outside of the sockets, and they can't have light maps. There are too many of them. It won't make sense from a performance and memory perspective. And we can't have light maps at all on the terrain. So we implemented something that's called deferred light, fully dynamic lights, optimized specifically for the PS3 in our case. And the artists have different level of cost control so they don't kill performance. Side effect is, though, that they don't cast shadows, so we can't use them to light interiors or the components, which is why we have another solution for that. We added these to the particle system, so that every time we shoot a rocket, it's an explosion, there's fire, you will get these lights spawned and flying over the battlefield to give some nice effects for our particle systems. We also have some custom tech that we call Conetracing. It's dynamic indirect light. Very quickly, it renders a few slices of the world, includes a sky texture, and creates indirect lighting out of that. This also gives us real-time reflections. I say approximation because they are really rough, but when you use them properly and in the right way and in a subtle way, it will make everything in the whole scene kind of come together. And this is something that also evened us a lot with the reflections, shiny reflections on every surface, and now we have that in dust as well. So Conetracing works like this. If you look at these pipes, there's some yellow light bouncing up on them from the terrain. It's rough, it's approximative, but it gives it ties the objects into the environment. And I put some spheres here to show you how they pick up the indirect lighting. And also, if you look at one of the spheres here, you can see how the reflection works. You see it's rough, but it's still there's some kind of reflection in this sphere. And if you look at the pipes, you can see a kind of a blue shiny reflection on the surface of them. Also in this HAV, there is a subtle hint of reflection coming from the sky on top of in the surface of the metal. And if you look at this area again, that as you remember was just objects placed on the terrain, they have no light maps or any kind of fancy lighting. And all shadowed areas of this image are lit by Conetracing indirect light. So if I remove that, it will get all black in all those areas. So I'm not going to go through this again. Take a picture, look at the YouTube video. We have a lot of different lighting techs for our different kind of environments. So if we look at a district again, we make the landscapes, the terrain, we deploy the surface infrastructures, we create environment types, we add some game mode levels that tells the game how to run, and then we add the atmosphere. And it all comes down to this. Our battle config file that we send from the server to the client. And this time I only use orange because it's a nice color to highlight. Here's our sockets, including the mood socket. We also specify the mood. Terraforming is in there somewhere. We call it terraforming internally. We're not really doing terraforming, which would be awesome if we did, but that's our working name. And the level game mode. So where does this get us in terms of combinations? This is the amount of content we have currently, which will be available in Uprising. And I've removed the medium sockets and the small sockets because if you start counting them, we will get up to billions of combinations. But it's not really fair. They only change a small part of the look of the battlegrounds. And since you guys can't replace them in Planetary Conquest, I decided to keep them out of here. But if we hypothetically created one new type as one new piece of these different types and maybe a few more moods every quarter, I'm not saying we're doing it, I'm saying if we were to do it, we would get up into a quite big amount of combinations quite quickly. So all this tech that we have developed can be used for some more fun stuff as well. You guys all remember this, I assume. So we wanted to create a memorable event to highlight the Even Dust link. And you guys know how it ended. We had a big spaceship crashing into a Caldari Prime. But we used all this tech that we have developed to create this event on the dust side. We had very little time, so we had to restrict the amount of content we were making. So we decided to do a few new components. We took an old one and we broke it apart. We went into the battlegrounds and placed additional debris like burning meshes scattered over the battleground that will be loaded only if we load a certain mood level. So we created a new mood level with the spaceship, with some like debris falling down from the sky. And together, when we combined this, we got the whole new experience. And we did this in maybe 2 weeks. And then we used our custom tech that we have created that that gives us the ability to deploy all of this content onto our servers, and they will be downloaded directly to your PS3s when you connect. So we don't have to wait for a Sony update or a major release to ship content out. As you guys know, we're still in beta, so there was some settings that wasn't really set correctly, and this ended up on YouTube before it was supposed to. But, you know, it happens sometimes. Next time we won't. So we can stream out everything that we have created. Everything I've talked about here can be streamed out. We can create new full terrains and ship them out to the PS3s. New components. We can change spawn points on the battlegrounds, which we do very often based on player feedback. We see on the forums, we get feedback saying, "Hey, I'm spawning here in this right in the fire. There's no cover where I spawn." We go in, we move the spawn point, and we ship out a new version of this map as soon as we can to remove all of these irritation moments for the players. Or we just use it to create events like this. I know you guys have seen the trailer, but let's watch it again. If the video guy turns it on. Hey. Sorry, PowerPoint were giving me so much shit for this, so we had to do it this ugly way.
Caldari Prime. Are you sure you're up for this?
Attacking a sovereign Caldari planet in the middle of Galente space. My people can get the job done, but it's gonna be tight. We're gonna need some help getting through.
We're tracking significant movement of Caldari forces towards the border zone. This could be our only chance to take back Caldari Prime.
You handle the Titan. We'll take care of the rest. Overwatch, we are moving forward on District 5. Please stand by in orbit.
Fire up your engines. The blockade ends today. Keep calm. Focus on your primaries. We'll make it through.
I don't know where you got your intel from, but we're getting slaughtered down here. We need that strike.
It's no picnic up here either. We're working on it.
Somebody light up that HAV.
I'm through. Charlie, echo groups, keep them off me as long as you can.
Coordinates locked in.
Heads down. Here it comes.
Yes! That's how it's done. All clear. Moving on to the objective. Overwatch. Planetary defenses have been knocked out.
The Leviathan is taking critical damage. Won't be long now.
Thank you. So we're finalizing all our tech. Doesn't mean we're going to leave it. We're going to polish it, refine it. But we now have an amazing amount of tech that enable us to do a lot of awesome content. And we have the commitment to constantly update the game with new content. And now, as a testament to that, this is our completely redesigned mountains terrain, where we also added a few new battlegrounds that will be available to you guys in the Uprising release, as well as in the room over here. So you can try them out for yourselves and see all the other, this and all the other visual improvements that we have made for the game for this release. And I'm actually really proud to say it's a huge leap in quality compared to what we had before. And with that, I can take a few questions. And we have these QR codes. I don't know if people told you. If you have a scanner, scan it. You get to a questionnaire where you can give feedback on the presentation as well. Thank you. And I might want to mention, I happily answer questions based on what I've been talking about. If you have questions on Planetary Conquest, check out the keynote, the Dusk keynote this afternoon, or attend the talk about Planetary Conquest on Friday.
Testing. Is that?
Yeah, it works.
Cool. So I actually have two questions, and they're both kind of about where you plan on going next. Would you be thinking, A, of adding kind of water to a terrain, maybe rivers and small pools and stuff like that? And secondly, right now we've basically only got Caldari and Galenti structures about the place, so do you have a timeline on when we'd be getting Amarian and Minmatar SIs as well?
So the first question about if we're going to add water, there's a lot of technical issues to overcome with water. Yes, we can have puddles of water with what we have now, but what happens when you drive a tank into a big pool of water? Will it explode? Will it die? Will it be able to run underwater? Can a drop suit swim? We have all of these things. We haven't really have time to address those. You can say we want to add water because, you know, we have the planets that have a lot of water. You want to have a district. If it's close to water, you want to see the water. As soon as we can, but nothing in the pipeline right now.
Okay.
So sorry, the second question.
The second one was about whether you have a timeline on Minmatar and the Amarian SIs.
We are currently working on some Galente stuff, and I think that's all I can say about that right now.
Yep. Cheers.
Thank you.
Kurik Roden, Adrian Robotics. I was wondering about the man hours required to create a terrain versus a mood and environment.
Together with some polish, I think you can wrap up a mood in about a week for one guy. Terrains, the way we streamline our terrain process right now, all the terrains you see here in this presentation and in Uprising are actually completely new versions of our old terrains. And our art and terrain team of 3 guys made those in 3 months.
Hello, I'm Gridaris. My question, with the SIs, especially the bigger size, the major ones, is it possible with the system you've got, or even possible to develop a system where the base SI itself, so that's the structures and most of the things itself stay the same, but you can dynamically alter little things like the positions of crates or vehicles or just little things to make some variation so you're not finding in exactly the same structure on a different planet somewhere else, just to give it a little bit more variety?
With our current tech, the static light maps would cause the most problems because they, you can have light bouncing from one thing down to something else. If we go more dynamic, the debris we added for the Caldari Prime event is dynamic. We have to take some kind of nav data into consideration as well, so it's not trivial to do any of this. We have thought about it. We could almost do it, but we are not going that way right now.
Alrighty.
Hi, I understand that you'll be implementing skyboxes from the next expansion so that you can see the ships that are firing down on you. I'm not exactly sure how technically this can work, but would you be able to see the shadows of the ships projected across the landscape as they are, if they are actually superimposed with the position of the sun?
Funny, actually, I had this question in a Twitch interview we did the other day as well.
Okay. I watched that.
Not saying anything about what you will see in the sky or something, but I'm guessing, I'm not really sure. Well, I mean, the big spaceship are the size of moons, right?
Right.
So they would theoretically cast a shadow over the battlefield. But all in shadow, we lose a lot of visual quality from that. So we're trying to have as much sunlight or moonlight as possible. And I'm not sure we actually want to shadow a whole battleground with the ship shadow.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nova Knife. My question was, right now the maps and the terrains, right now they're all mostly wide open, and the SI is basically the choke points, everything, all the cover is basically SI. Are you going to be doing any sort of maps where we have canyons, such as the original Crater Lake, where the terrain itself can become the choke points and stuff like that?
We haven't done it previously because the terrain wasn't really up to par with what we wanted. Now that we have much better terrain creation process, I'm definitely sure we can do stuff like that. I know I want to do things like that. So that's just about, you know, time and what we focus on. We can definitely do things like that.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Regnum. I was just wondering on the topics of game modes. Will we be seeing any new game modes in the sequel future? And what's like the process of making new game modes other than ambush and scrimmage?
Whether we're getting anything new in the foreseeable future, I suggest you go attend a keynote.
Okay.
For Dust. I'm not really the right guy to talk to about game modes and how we create them. It would be better to hook up one of our game designers a little later. So I'm sorry if I can't answer that question.
Hi there. I think the visuals look really, really good for current gen consoles, by far in excess of what a lot of other games do. But in some battles that can have a lot of people in, there does seem to be a bit of a performance hit sometimes. I mean, there's me and a few friends play, and we all quite frequently, I'd guess, it can drop under 20 FPS in certain situations. Have you considered, and I know this is probably a bit of a sacrilege to anyone who's worked on the game artist-wise, but have you ever considered the option of maybe being able to turn the material resolution down so the gameplay stops at a higher FPS? Has there been any considerations from that? Because sometimes it can really get in the way of the actual core gameplay there.
So there's a lot of things we have been working on for the Uprising release. We've done a lot of rendering optimizations to be able to, specifically to be able to get rid of these peak performance choke points where you have a lot of effects and stuff going on. So we have been working a lot on it. We are going to work even more on it for future releases to optimize the game. It's not really the materials and the geometry that is our bottlenecks. It's other things in the Unreal Engine. Like particles are expensive, and also the amount of players and vehicles that we have. We have a lot of them, and those are areas of optimizations. Just make those systems work faster, so we can have the same amount of players, or even more, that running really well.
Yeah, cool. I know there's a lot of people that when it actually comes to, you know, when it comes to the more serious matches and the non-public matches, just having the option to turn those particle systems and things right down would be massively.
Okay, so adding. Well, actually, I haven't thought about that. Yeah. So I misunderstood the question a little bit. Certainly something we could look into.
Yeah. Because the public matches, it's great just to be able to run around and not really worry about it too much, but the other ones, FPS is really king.
Yeah. That's actually a good idea. Maybe we even have a rendering programmer here somewhere.
Cool, thank you.
All right.
Hello. Checking, seems like eventually the people will be directly affected who in EVE with the PI. Will people be able to choose their own structures if that happens?
So if people will be able to choose what SI to place? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, that will be available. Out of the library that we create, of course.
Of course.
Yeah. They will talk more about that on Planetary Conquest.
Excellent.
I guess that's it. Thank you guys for listening.